Games, it's Cassadi, games, and Ambie, and Crystal, the board game blitzers, we're showing you our favorite games.
Well, this is it, Ambie. We've reached our top 10 board games of all time. So We've come together, we've joined forces, we did all of our other videos separately because doing videos together from a distance, it's hard. So we decided to make it slightly easier on ourselves, and we're just doing the top 10 together. And we're also going to be discussing Cassadi's top 10 as well. She was planning on joining us for this recording, but she wasn't able to. But we have her list, and so we're going to talk about her games also. So Ambie, how do you feel? Like, all your videos, you've gone through 100 through 11 now. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings?
Well, it was definitely a challenge to put it together and talk about all the games, especially since I haven't played all of the games recently, since there's 100 of them. That's pretty hard. So I'm trying to explain them, and then I found that at first I was explaining them very quickly, but then as I got off the list, I wanted to talk more about them, so it was getting more difficult to explain them, I think.
I had the same problem. And it's weird. We talk about board games on the podcast and on other live video shows all the time. And I usually feel like I can speak somewhat eloquently about the games that I've played. This project has proved to me that is not true, at least not all the time, because I said some of the dumbest things while I was recording these videos. I don't know if it's because I was kind of marathon recording some of them, but I feel like I lost the ability to describe any board game at certain points. So hopefully people powered through all of my videos. But honestly, I wouldn't blame them if they were like, oh gosh, this is bad.
Yeah, I'm hoping editing saves mine. I'm doing a bunch of jump cuts for when I paused and didn't know what to say.
I'm not doing that, so mine are just going to be pretty bad, I think. Oh, also, my dogs are in just about every single video I recorded. They're all over the place. Like, Maybe's crawling on my lap, and Sterling is licking himself in the midst of a video. I had to actually put an emoji on top of him in the video because, well, no one wants to see that. So... All right, I guess we're it's time. We're moving on. So let's get on with the countdown.
Yay! My number 10 is Witness, which is a 4-player exactly cooperative game. It's like a mix between logic puzzles with a mystery in them and telephone, where each person gets a different clue and you're whispering the clues to the next person, and that person whispers to the next person, and you keep doing that. So, like, your clue only gets to the last person by whispering through a couple of people. And then everyone eventually gets all the clues and has to answer some questions. And it's cooperative, so you're trying to all answer the questions correctly, but you can't talk to each other about it. And it's really quick. It's like a 15-minute game because there's just a couple of questions and there's 4 rounds of whispering, I think. But I really like it because I like the puzzle part, and it's really funny just whispering and not understanding what the person said. And it's like, okay, someone messed up somewhere because we have no idea how to answer this question.
So I imagine they're not allowed to like re-whisper, right? If you didn't hear them or whatever, like it's kind of... Because in telephone, that was the whole thing. Like in telephone, whatever you heard is what you heard, and yeah, that was it.
So I think like each round, you whisper, and then once you're done with that round, then it's done, but you can whisper it multiple times. Okay. But, like, the other person can't be talking to you.
Okay, so they can't
be like, oh, you said this. But,
okay,
no,
so you can't
have
confirm.
To just keep whispering, yeah.
I've heard people talk about this game so many times, and I've never played it. I will admit that the idea of whispering in people's ears kind of skeeves me out a little bit.
Yeah,
like,
so you have to do it with your friends, like, people that you're comfortable with.
I mean, but, like, even people in my board game group, like, I don't know if I want... I'm kind of a little bit, like... not a germaphobe per se, but like the idea of other people whispering in my ear just doesn't sound very appealing, but the game sounds great. So
yeah,
I'd let you whisper sweet nothings in my ear. So maybe I'll play it with you sometime.
If you have a big enough room, you can just like go into really opposite corners and then talk to the other person. But then
but I imagine some of the fun is kind of misunderstanding, like in telephone, you know, where it gets lost in translation, so to speak. All right, that's cool. So and I guess we didn't say at the beginning of this video, but we don't know each other's top 10.
Oh, yeah.
We didn't spoil this for one another. So everything you all are hearing, it's the first time we're hearing it from each other as well. So that's a cool pick, and I don't think I would have pegged that for your top 10. So my number 10 probably won't be as much of a surprise to Ambie. It is Sagrada. I love Sagrada. I've talked about it so many times. It is a unique theme. You're building stained glass windows like the ones at the Sagrada Familia, which is in Europe. And there's an interesting combination of dice drafting and dice placement. It's a little bit puzzly in how you place your dice to try and make sure you can place other dice well. The setups for your individual boards have varying difficulties, so you can make it easier or more difficult on yourself. And the variable setup that happens with each game, where different types of things will score and you'll have different tools to use to manipulate the dice, make every single game feel a little bit different. So even though the theme is a little bit pasted on, truthfully, it works well with the mechanisms, and the variability means that I always want to come back to it. So I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, I played it once and I had a really good time. Also, like, the drafting of the dice is fun.
Yeah, the dice drafting is good, and I like the fact that it's a snake draft. So, the first player picks first and last, so on and so forth. It's really good, and that is why it is my number 10. Sagrada. So Cassadi's number 10 is Istanbul, which I don't know if I would have put this on her top 10 if I had to guess, but it's a game that I've played before. Have you played Istanbul before?
Yeah, I've played it a couple times.
I think I've got a couple plays under my belt as well. This one's neat also because it does have variable setup in the beginning, and there's a lot of different cool things you can do with your little workers as you move them around the board. So yeah, I think this was a good pick. My number 9 is Steam Park. I really like this game. It came out a few years ago, and it is a game where you are building an amusement park for robots. And it's cool because it blends a couple of different game themes that you don't usually see together, in that it's essentially a city building game, although you're building an amusement park, not a city, but there's a real-time dice rolling aspect to it, which is how you select the actions you're going to take every round. So you have to quickly roll your dice and make sure you get the actions that you need, but the faster you roll your dice, the better placement you're going to have in the round, and then you can get the rides and the stands that you want to put in your park, and you can attract lots of robots to your rides, and then you can clean up all the dirt that the robots leave in your park. You have to manage a lot of different things in this game, but it works together really well, and it looks neat when it's set up on the table because the rides are these little cardboard 3D things that the robots actually sit on. So it's really, really neat, and I love it. The dice are kind of like these little tan wooden looking dice, which are different than dice in most games, and they have icons printed on every side of them. They're completely unique dice to this game. So I really like it, and that is why it is my number 9. Steam Park.
Yeah, Steam Park's pretty fun. I've played it once, and I didn't really know much about the game, except I heard it was real time, and then from looking at it, it doesn't look like it's that involved of a game, but it was a lot more involved than I expected. But yeah, it was pretty fun.
Yeah, there is a lot going on there, and I've found it can be pretty harsh to new players because until you know the types of things that'll benefit you, it's kind of hard to get things going. But I've gotten better at teaching it over the years, and so I try and explain to people kind of a little bit of strategic information at the beginning as well, so they aren't left floundering, rolling their dice last and being like, I don't know what to do.
Okay, my number 9 is 9 Tiles. I didn't plan the number matchup there, but 9 Tiles is a speed game by Oink Games, so it's in a little box, and each player has 9 tiles that are each double-sided and have different symbols on each side, and you're trying to match a pattern. There's a deck of pattern cards, and you're trying to match them with your tiles by flipping them over and moving them around, and whoever gets it first takes the card in the middle. So, really quick game, but
really quick.
Yeah. I like pattern matching speed games, and this is, I think, my favorite. Yeah, this is my favorite pattern.
You have to look at the rest of the list just to make sure.
Because, yeah, it's portable, and it's really quick and simple, and I really like it.
Yeah, I like Ninetales quite a bit. It did not actually make my list, my top 100, but it's really fun. Although inevitably, whenever I'm playing this game, I'll be like, oh, so blue's on that side, so yellow must be on the other side, so I'll flip it and it's pink. And then I'm like, okay, so blue is on that side, so it must be pink, and I'll flip it over and it's green. And I'm like, where's the thing I'm looking for? And I can never find it. Although every time I play, I can never do it at the beginning, and then toward the end of the game, I've somehow in my brain subconsciously memorized which tiles are which. Yeah. But then by the time I've played it again, it's all gone. So it's a good one, though. I like that one a lot.
Yeah.
So Cassadi's number 9 is Castles of Burgundy. And I know this is a classic that a lot of board gamers really, really love. And Cassadi obviously loves it too. I've actually never played it before.
Yeah, I've played it once. It's a dice Euro, which isn't my favorite type of game. but Cassadi likes them. We know Cassadi loves dice.
Oh, no. That's a lie. Don't be spreading lies about Cassadi while she's not here.
She loves dice Euros, I think.
I think that would be true. I bet, I think I could actually name a couple others that she probably enjoys, like Euro games that utilize dice. But I, even though I like dice, usually don't also like dice Euro games, although there are some exceptions to that rule, but neither here nor there.
My number 8 is Robinson Crusoe Adventures on the Cursed Island, which is a cooperative game where you're trying to survive on an island. And you each play as different characters. I've only played it 4 players, so we had 4 different characters. And each character has different abilities. Like there's a cook who can cook things and heal people, and there's an explorer an adventurer explorer who's good at exploring. But basically, on your turn, on each round, you're doing a bunch of different actions with your workers. You have pawns that go to different places on the board to do actions, and you can either choose to have 2 pawns go there, which uses up more people, but also guarantees that you'll be doing it. Or you can just have 1 person go there, and then you have to roll dice, and you could fail at whatever you're trying to do, and also bad things can happen. You can get hurt, or bad adventures happen. So it's interesting to make that decision, because there are a lot of things you want to do, and you don't have enough workers to do everything, but then you want to make sure you get things done, so you have to double up on some things. And I really enjoy playing it, and the theme I think is really cool too, because just trying to survive on the island it feels like that, because you're always
struggling,
and there's a lot of different scenarios too, which are fun.
Yeah, so, I've only played this one once, I believe. I think, and it did not make my list at all either, but I think this is one that would make my list if I had played it more, because I really enjoyed it the one time I did play it. But it is brutal. It's so hard.
Yeah.
I think my favorite part of this game is the mechanism in which, when something happens to you, a card goes back into the deck, and then it'll pop up later, and then potentially a good or bad thing will happen. Yeah. Like, if you break your leg, and then the card goes in the deck, then later, oh no, maybe now your leg is infected, or something. I don't know. It's not always bad, I think. Again, I only played it once.
But usually you can do something bad now to prevent something worse happening later.
Oh, yeah. That sounds right. So, that's a good choice. And I definitely would like to play that game more in the future. So my number 8 is the reason that I had to kind of upheave a little bit of my list at the last minute, because I made this list a couple of months ago, and then I played this game. And I told Ambie that it wasn't going to be in my top 10.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said.
It wasn't. And then I just kept looking at it and the other games around it, and it had to be in my top 10. It's that good, and that is Legacy of Dragonholt. So I just played this game for the first time fairly recently, and oh my goodness, it's so wonderful. I love it so much. Legacy of Dragonholt is basically a combination between a board game and an RPG and a choose-your-own-adventure book, all mashed up together in the most wonderful way. You create characters like you would for an RPG, giving them stats and items and things like that. And then you go through this book, and you read different scenarios, and then you make decisions based on the prompts that it gives you. And sometimes those decisions you can make no matter who you are or what you are, but then sometimes the decisions hinge on the items you've collected, or the skills that you have, or even like your race or class. So you will only be able to make certain decisions in certain points of the game. It can be played with 1 to 6 people, and if you're playing with more than one person, each person's character has an activation token, and when a person makes a decision, it gets flipped over, and they don't get to make another decision until everyone else has had a chance. So it makes sure that the decision making gets spread amongst the whole group. But I actually played this game solo and had a lovely time with it. I created 2 characters, so I still used the activation tokens to make sure that each of them was getting to make an equal number of decisions during the course of the game, and that worked really well. I made 2 characters that were very different from one another, so they both tended to handle situations differently. I can't spoil any of the story, nor would I want to, because it's really awesome. A lot of people aren't keen on how the game ends. I didn't mind it. I think that if you go into this game trying to win it, you will potentially have a bad time. I think if you go into this game trying to have a really cool experience, you're going to be a winner all day, every day. It's so good. And Ambie, I know you've been wanting to try it. I definitely think you should. It literally, it forced its way into my top 10. I couldn't help it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to play through it again. Like, even though I've seen a lot of the story points, there's tons of stuff that I didn't get to see when I was playing through it. There's these little side quest books and all this other stuff. And I didn't even get through, I mean, probably not even half of the material, if I was being honest. So I have more of it to play, even though I've played through the whole thing once. So it forced its way in. My number 8 is Legacy of Dragonholt.
And Cassidy's number 8 is Tokaido, which she's talked about on the podcast before. Tokaido is a game where you're going along a track and collecting things, I think. I've only played it once. But I remember she said it was very calming, I think.
Yes, so I have played Tokaido a lot, and I actually can tell you where it ended up on my list. So Tokaido was number 54 on my top 100 list. It is you going on a vacation on the old Tokaido Road in Japan, and along the way, you want to have as many fulfilling experiences as you can. And that's, eating food, painting landscapes, buying souvenirs, relaxing in hot springs, and things like that. And the game utilizes a mechanism wherein the person whose pawn is last on the track is the one who gets to go next. So turn order is determined by the pawns on the track, kind of like in Patchwork or Thebes. And so it's neat because the turn order isn't always set, and it is really calming. It's very zen. The expansions for it are great. I talked about it at length in my video for 50 or 60 through 51, so people, I guess, can go watch that for more details. But good choice, Cassidy. It's on my list, too. Tokaido is your number 8. My number 7 is the Networks. In the Networks, you and the other players are each television executives running your own TV network, hiring stars and putting ads into your lineup of shows. And then your shows will gain you viewers, and eventually the shows will get sent into syndication or pulled out of your lineup, and you'll add new shows. And it's really, really fun. It's weirdly thematic for what it is. You have to buy new stars, but some stars will only go in specific genres of shows, and there are puns for days in this game. All of the TV show names and a lot of the stars and the ads are parodies of real life television things, and they're really funny. I never get tired of seeing them. They always crack me up. I really like this game quite a bit, and so that is why I have it as my number 7, the Networks. Ambie, have you played this one?
I played it once. I didn't like it that much, but it was cute.
Well, that's okay, because my love for it makes up for that. So,
my number 7 is Strike, which you
guessed. Okay.
But yes, Strike is a dexterity / press your luck type game. But there's an arena, and you have these dice that you're throwing into it.
Gladiators!
It's a dice and arena game. But
Gladiator!
Yeah, so the theme is gladiators in an arena, and you're there's a die in there, and you're throwing dice in there, trying to get pairs so you get the dice back out, and you're trying to be the last player in. So when you throw the dice in and you don't get pairs, you'll get eliminated if you run out of dice. But there's also an X on one of the sides of the dice, and if you roll that one just dies immediately. Also, if the arena gets emptied, then you have to roll all your dice, or gladiators. But it's a really quick game, and we play it a lot at conventions, but we try to, it's really fun trying to hit the dice that are already in there to try to roll them over onto the sides that are also in there to try to get pairs with the dice that are in there, because you're allowed to hit the dice that are in the arena. So you try to hit it to roll it onto its side to get a pair and get more dice back. So I have a lot of fun playing Strike, and that's my number 7.
You'll have to be mad at Legacy of Dragonholt because Strike is my number 11. It was just outside of my top 10, and only because of Legacy of Dragonholt.
Wow.
And I struggled, I'm telling you, but it's just outside of my top 10, but I love it too.
11 is still really good.
Oh yeah, no, I love Strike. It's always a great time. So Cassidy's number 7 is 7 Wonders. I don't know if she did that intentionally, but probably.
The number thing too.
7 Wonders is a card drafting set collection style game, which you can play with up to 7 people, and the time isn't really changed by the number of players, which is kind of cool. It's kind of a modern classic at this point, I would say. I like 7 Wonders. It did not make my top 100, but it's a fun game. So is this one of that? Is blah blah? I'm gonna keep stumbling, and I know this is gonna end up in the final video because we're not cutting this. But have you played 7 Wonders, Ambie?
I've played it once, I think, but it was a long time ago.
Oh, really? It's so funny. Yeah. A lot of mine and Cassidy's games, you're like, I played that one time.
Yes, this is why I had a lot of games that I played once that I had to cut.
That makes sense. Well, Good choice, Cassidy. We like it. So her number 7 was 7 Wonders.
My number 6 is 1880 China, which is an 18xx game that I've talked about a bit on the podcast.
Communism!
Yes, so there's communism in it, which is one of the interesting things because during communism, the stock price does not move. Normally, in other games, when you pay out dividends in your company or if you sell shares, the stock prices move around. But during communism, it doesn't. So you can do anything you want without worrying about stock price, which is interesting. Another interesting thing
That's a good quote. You can do anything you want during communism.
Yep. But yeah, another interesting thing is the operating order of the corporations is fixed when you start them. So normally it changes based on the share price, but here, I guess because of the government, it's just always fixed. And you can do some interesting things with that. Another thing that I like a lot is that you can own 100% of the shares of a corporation, which normally you're capped out. And I tend to make really good companies that have really good routes, like most of the time. So it's really cool being able to own 100% of it.
Like a boss.
Yeah. Well, a lot of times if I make it too good too quickly, other people will buy it first before I can max out. But like once I was able to sneakily have a bad company first and then make it really good after I bought out all the shares. So that's fun. Just sneaking it in there. And so another thing, maybe not the last thing, but the last thing I'm going to talk about that's interesting about 1880 is that each player gets a minor company to start with, and you want to hook it up to your other corporation. So you like building routes with that, and there's some timing because the minor company gets a lot of money and then it can transfer into the major company. And there's a lot of things to do with that, with the timing of when you want to do it to get the best thing for your company. But yeah, I have a lot of fun playing 1880 China, and I played it, I think, like 8 or 9 times last year with our group. That was our main game last year.
Very cool. So my number 6 is a Euro game. There's a Euro game on my top 10, Ambie. Do you know which one it is?
I can't think right now, so no.
Okay, so it's a game that came out in 2018.
2018, that's this year.
That's this year. It's pretty new.
Dinosaur Island?
No, although that is on my top 100 list, and that would have been a good guess for sure.
Whew. Yeah, I don't know what else came out this year.
All right, well, I won't make you guess for endlessly. This will be like a long video potentially. So my number 6 is Castell.
Oh, okay. I haven't played that, so
I love this game so much. I cannot stop raving about it. I make everybody play it with me, and everybody loves it. So Castell it's technically a Euro game, but it has a really strong and unique theme in that the theme of the game is you are constructing a team of Castellers to perform in Catalonian human tower festivals. And this is like a tradition in Catalonia from like a long, long time ago. I mean, it's still going on today, and don't go down that YouTube rabbit hole unless you have a lot of time to kill, because it's really fascinating to watch them build these towers out of people. But in this game, you're utilizing set collection and pattern building. You're traveling around the map, picking up new Castellers to add to your team, and then actually constructing a flat two-dimensional tower out of the people you've collected. And then you go and perform at festivals throughout different points during the game, and you gain points based on how well you built your tower. And you can train your Castellers to do different types of skills, which will increase the ways you can build your tower. So you're very constricted when the game first starts in what you can do with your tower. But as you travel around and practice and train, you'll be able to modify the rules that affect how you can build your tower. So you can build it bigger and better and more awesome. And I love this game so much. It's wonderful. And after the first time I played it, I was like, well, this is one of my new favorites. And then the more I've played it, which has now been a bunch of times, I just love it more and more every time. And so it had to be on my list, and it was an easy pick for one of my top 10 games. So that is my number 6, Castell.
Wow. Yeah, I still need to play it. Okay. Cassadi's number 6 is Russian Railroads, which is a Euro game as well. And
a little more Euro-y, I think.
yeah, it's a little heavier. I think it's like a 2-hour game. But in Russian Railroads, there's like 4 different types of things you can do to get points, and it's worker placement. So you're putting your workers down, doing the different actions to go up the different tracks to get points. And I've only played it a couple of times, so I'm probably doing a really bad explanation.
That's okay.
But yeah, basically, when you do something and you keep doing it, you get better and better points. So your points keep like exponentially growing. In the first round, you get like 10 points or something. By the end of their game, you're getting like 100 points in a round.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's a very high scoring game.
I've never played Russian Railroads. Based on your couple of plays, do you think it would be one I like? I do enjoy worker placement Euros, but I don't. I don't know. You know what? Maybe we'll have Cassadi chime in behind the scenes and let me know. But if she likes it that much, maybe it's worth a shot. So that was Cassadi's number 6, Russian Railroads. My number 5 is The Pursuit of Happiness. This game is basically a gamery version of the game of life. And I always loved the game of life as a kid, but I kind of wished that there were more interesting decisions to be made, and Pursuit of Happiness does exactly that. So in the Pursuit of Happiness, which is a worker placement game, you are spending time, which are these little hourglass pieces. Ironic, considering our mascot is an hourglass. Those are your workers that you're placing on the board to determine what you're going to do. So you can pick up activities or jobs or start relationships or start projects and pick them up, put them in front of you, and you can only manage so many things at a time, otherwise you get stressed. And stress is the measure by which you will eventually die and be eliminated from the game. But while there is theoretical player elimination in this game, generally all of the players tend to die around the same time in life once they've hit old age. Some players will sometimes make it one extra round if they've done some things to increase their health earlier in the game. But it's really neat because you kind of get to like live out a fantasy life where you've got an interesting job and maybe a relationship, and now you're collecting board games or other things, and you're going snowboarding or kayaking, and you all of a sudden bought a big, huge speaker system for your house. And I don't know, I love it. The game's really colorful and pretty, and it's fun, and the theme is interesting, and this one is always a big hit when I bring it out. And I do like the expansion that adds a community board, which gives you a popularity track as well. So that's great. But the base game by itself is wonderful too. You don't need the expansion, but it is fun. I know you played this with me once at BlitzCon.
Yeah.
Did you? And you said you liked this one a little bit, right?
Yeah, I liked it a lot. And I thought the theme's really cool. And like, it makes sense that things that you do add stress and make your life shorter sometimes. I thought that was really cool, the theme. Yeah,
the mechanisms in this game work with the theme in ways that I didn't expect. So, like, if you do one thing like a certain activity per round, it's usually kind of free. As long as you have the worker to spend on it, you can do it. But if you want to go do that same activity again, because you're neglecting other things and you're focusing on one thing, you get more stressed. And sometimes it gives you it reduces your happiness level as well, because when you tend to focus on one thing in life, sometimes you get stressed. So yeah, it's really, really thematic, but the mechanics are smart too. So that is why it is my number 5, The Pursuit of Happiness.
My number 5 is The Resistance Avalon. And this is the one where I mentioned in our intro that I'm combining it with The Resistance, because The Resistance Avalon is basically the same game as The Resistance, except for there are characters added. So my explanation is gonna be basically like both of the games. But in The Resistance, there are 2 teams and they're hidden identities. So there's a team of spies and then the Resistance. And the Resistance are the good guys, the spies are the bad guys. And you're going on different missions. There's 5 missions, and each mission, there are a certain number of people go on it. People vote on who gets to go on it, and then when they go on the mission, they secretly put in pass or fail cards. And if there's fail card, then the mission fails. And if it's all passes, then the mission succeeds. But only the spies can put in fail cards. So after a couple missions have happened, then people are like, oh, this one failed, one of you has to be bad, and then there's lots of accusations. And it's also a lot of deduction, which is what I like about it, because if a mission failed, then you know that one of the people is bad, because the good people aren't allowed to put fails in. That's against the rules. So I really like that. And the reason I like The Resistance Avalon over The Resistance is because they add a character called Merlin. The theme of Resistance Avalon is Camelot, so instead of spies and resistance, it's the loyal knights of Arthur are the good guys and the minions of Mordred are the bad ones. But we still call them spies because the theme isn't that, doesn't feel like Merlin. But anyways, so the good people have a character named Merlin who knows who the bad people are, but he can't be found out because the bad people can pick someone to kill at the end of the game if the good people win. And if they kill Merlin, then the bad people win. So I like that because in the regular game, if you're bad, you know all of the information and there's nothing to deduce. But in Resistance Avalon, you don't know who Merlin is. So you still have like things to figure out during the game. So it's there's still some thinking for you to do, I guess. So I like the Resistance Avalon a lot. It used to be my favorite game, but it's hard to get played because it needs 5 people minimum, I think. So,
yeah, and you need the right group of people too. Like this doesn't work with every group.
Mm-hmm.
Although I must say, I've played the Resistance quite a few times. I've never actually played the Resistance Avalon. So I know exactly how it works. And I think I've played other games that are similar in nature, but I've just never technically played Avalon. Or maybe I have. I don't know. If I have, it's been maybe once.
Yeah, there are other characters too in Avalon, but I don't really play them, so yeah.
Very cool. All right, so Cassadi's number 5 is Clank, a deck building adventure game. And Clank showed up on my list as well, I think in the mid-20s somewhere. I could pull it up, but that would require clicking on my computer. So I think it may have been like 24 or something like that. But Clank is a deck building game that actually has a board, which a lot of deck building games do not do. You are adventurers diving down into a dragon's lair, trying to grab treasures and get out before the dragon kills you. And every time you do certain actions, it causes noise, which is called clank, and that makes the dragon angry, and he gets mad and damages you. So it's push your luck in that you want to go down as far as possible to get the really valuable treasures, but once one player leaves the cave and gets out, then a kind of a countdown timer essentially starts via the round track, and everyone has to get out within a certain amount of rounds, otherwise you get killed by the dragon. So it's really fun. I like Clank quite a bit. Cassadi loves it too, obviously. Ambie, do you like Clank?
It's okay. As I mentioned in one of the early videos, that Dominion is still my favorite deck builder. Which is funny because it's my least favorite. I literally refuse to play Dominion. There are very few games I'll say that about, and that's one of them. I don't like the adding stuff onto it because I like the pureness of Dominion. But Clank was fun. My coworkers really like it. They've been playing it at work.
Oh, that's cool.
After work, not during work. But
yeah, we don't want to get anybody in trouble here. All right, cool. So that was Cassidy's number 5, Clank.
My number 4 is 1889, which is an 18xx game. It's similar to 1830 in the rules, but the map is in Japan. It's an island in Japan, Shikoku, I think. And it's one of the games that I use for a beginner intro to 18xx games because the map is small. The tiles are easier to lay. There's no double towns, so it's simpler to learn. And there's one fewer company than 1830. But otherwise, rules are pretty similar to 1830. And I've also been playing it with our group who already knows how to play 18xx games and having fun with that too. So it's my favorite 18xx game currently. Spoiler? I don't know. But yeah, it's really interesting because the game can be very different depending on how it's played. So a lot of times 18xx games are either more stock heavy or more route building heavy, but 1889 I think can be played either way. So it can have a train rush if you play it with a lot of money, floating companies with a lot of money and buying trains aggressively, and then people go bankrupt. Or it can be not that and be less money and no one goes bankrupt. And we actually played a game recently where the 3 trains were permanent, which is the second type of train that comes out. Usually 2s, 3s, and 4s are not permanent, and then 5s are permanent. So in our game, the 3s stayed alive the whole game, which is interesting. But so there's a lot of different things, and it's a shorter 18xx game, so it's usually 2.5 to 3 hours when we play, which is short for an 18xx game, and that's because the bank is smaller. So even if you're playing through the bank running out, it's small, so there's a time limit there. And yeah, so 1889 is great for intro, and it's great for non-intro, so that's why it's my number 4.
Very cool. So my top 4 games on my list are all games that create pretty unique experiences, at least for me personally. And so I think that's why they're at the top of my list, even though the mechanics of some of the games lower down are maybe a little bit better or more sound. But my number 4 game is Runebound, specifically 3rd edition, although I really like 2nd edition as well. So this is actually the second game in my top 10 that is set in the world of Terranoth. It's the same world that Legacy of Dragonholt is set in. And while a lot of people will say, ugh, generic fantasy, whatever, I started playing Runebound back in 2007 with the 2nd edition with my friends in Kansas City, back when I still lived there. And this was kind of my first board game that I ever played that felt epic. You know, it took hours to play, and you were literally going on adventures and completing quests and fighting monsters in this big grandiose fashion. And I was just kind of blown away by it back then. And the game is really solid, so I've continued to love it over the years. The third edition of the game actually changed it up in a pretty significant way. I was doubtful, but I actually ended up liking. Combat used to be handled by dice in the second edition of the game, and in the third edition it's handled by tokens. And you take those tokens and you flip them up into the air, and depending on what side they land on, it determines what actions you get to take in a battle. And it's really cool because the enemy has tokens as well, and you spend your tokens back and forth throughout the course of a battle. So there's a lot of very interesting strategic decisions to be made there. Honestly, it is generic fantasy, but I love the world of Terranoth, and I love Runebound, and it's just great. I have all of the expansions for the third edition. I do miss some of the content that came with the second edition of the game because it had extra maps, whereas the third edition just has a single map board, and then the expansions just add new scenarios, new characters, and stuff like that. So Fantasy Flight, if somebody is listening to this video, please, please, please give me new maps for third edition. I would be so happy if that existed, but regardless, I still love it, and I will play it just about any time I have the time and the means. So that is why Runebound is my number 4.
Do you like the third edition better than second now?
It's hard to say because I played second edition a lot, but only when I lived in Kansas City. So it's literally been 10 years now since I last played it. My friend owned it. I've never owned a copy of second edition on myself. So I've played third edition a lot more, obviously, since it came out a couple of years ago. But it's kind of hard to marry the two in my head. Yeah. I really don't know. I liked one, I like the other. I don't know which I like more. So I'm just going to say third edition because it's the new one that new stuff is continuing to come out for.
And Cassadi's number 4 is Power Grid, which is an economic game where you're building power plants on a map and trying to get your network of power plants all powered. And the way you get the power plants is through auctions. So there's a bunch of power plants that come out and you're bidding on getting the power plants, and then you need to get the resources to power them, and you're trying to get the most money, I think. I've only played it once.
I've played it a couple times, but again, the only times I've ever played this game were when I lived in Kansas City. So it's been 10 plus years since the last time I played it. I was not a fan at that point, and I've kind of said over time, like, oh, maybe I should try it again, but I really am just not that compelled to do it. So who knows, maybe I'll play it again at some point, but that's obviously a classic. A lot of people love it, so that's a really good choice for your number 4, Cassadi. Power Grid. My number 3 is Near and Far, which I know. I was like, I told you that a new game was in my top 3, and this is it. So Near and Far is it's a kind of a worker placement, no, not really worker placement, like worker movement, exploration, adventure game where you're sending your travelers out to try and find the last ruin, and you're fighting bad guys and collecting treasure and encountering stories. And that is where the heart of this game lies, is when you go out adventuring, you come across story points and you flip open a book and you read from it, and then you have to make a decision. Kind of similar to Legacy of Dragonholt that we mentioned earlier, but this one is a lot more of a board game along with the story elements. There's a campaign that you can play through where there's a different map for every single scenario, but you can also play in arcade mode where you're reading story points off of cards instead of the main book. And then they also have specific character quests that you can go on for all of the characters that are included in the base box. I played through the entire normal campaign of this game with my friend Kathy and had a heck of a time with it. It was so much fun. I loved it, and we kept score throughout the whole thing, and I think I ended up beating her. Like, you added all your scores together for all of the scenarios. I think I beat her by like 1 point total. It was so close. Couldn't even. But even if I hadn't won, the experience was great. The story points are really interesting. The characters are dynamic, and Ryan Laukat, who Lockett. Lockett. I can never say his name right. Ryan Lockett. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's the one who both designed and did the artwork for this game. He is clearly a jack of all trades and so talented. I don't actually own a copy of this game yet because we were playing it at a board game cafe that had a copy when we played through the whole campaign, and then I backed the Kickstarter for the new edition with the expansion, the Amber Mines expansion that's coming out, and I think that's actually coming pretty soon, but I've been wanting to get my hands on it so much because I don't own it yet. So it is my number 3. It is a new entry into the top of my list because it just came out last year. But yeah, I know it's my number 3, near and far.
I still haven't played it. I guess I need to.
It's really mechanically pretty simple, but I love story in games. If you throw story into a game, I'm instantly gonna like it about 10 times more. And honestly, the game is super solid as well. So that's why I like it so much.
My number 3 is Dungeon Petz, which I've talked about a bit. So you may know I like it. But basically in Dungeon Petz, you are a pet store owner, but they're not just like regular pets. They are little monsters, cute little baby monsters that you're raising up to sell to the dungeon lords who need them for their dungeons. It's a interesting twist on the fantasy theme. But I really like it. It's a worker placement kind of, where you have these worker pieces, the little imps, but you're putting them into groups. And the way the order goes is that the group with the most imps in it goes first. So you could have a group of like 5 imps and a group of 3 imps, and then someone else has a group of 4 imps. So then your group of 5 imps goes first, and then you pick any space to go. And there's a bunch of different spaces, like spaces where you get food and where you get the pets, you buy cages for them, because you need to do all this stuff to take care of them. It's kind of like a Tamagotchi, because you need to feed them, you need to clean up after their poop, you need to play with them.
That is just like a Tamagotchi.
Yeah. But yeah, so there are different types of pets that have different personalities too, and they have different needs, and that's what you have to do. You feed them and stuff, but that's also what gives you points when you're showing them off at exhibitions and selling them to the dungeon lords, because the dungeon lords want certain pets with personalities, so you need to match them up well to get more points. So I really like the planning in that, to match them up to get the most points. And I also like the theme a lot. I think it works really well, and I like the art a lot too. It's really cute with the little pets. Yeah, so I like the game Dungeon Petz, my number 3.
And I know we've discussed this numerous times throughout the podcast and everything else, but at some point I am going to play this game with you because I do think I'll like it. We never, it's so funny, even when we're together for days, like at a convention, we just never seem to find time to play it,
yeah,
which I think that's the ultimate problem for every board gamer, is even with unlimited time, you never get to all the things you want to.
There's so many new games coming out, it's hard.
It's really hard to keep up. Mm-hmm. So Cassadi's number 3 is a modern classic for sure, and that is Carcassonne. Carcassonne is a tile-laying game where you are placing tiles and then putting your meeples onto the board in different capacities. You can put them as farmers or as, oh gosh, I can't remember literally any of the other names of things, but you put them on the road or you put them in a city or whatever else, and they get you different types of points based on where you placed them and how the board gets laid out. There are about 1 billion expansions to this that add tons of different types of mechanisms. I think the one that I played with, the Princess and the Dragon, that was pretty interesting. But honestly, the base game of Carcassonne is a great little game, so I think it's kind of a staple that most gamers should probably have in their collection, especially as far as gateway games go. But yeah, do you enjoy Carcassonne at all, Ambie, or is this another one that you're not keen on?
Yeah, well, tile placement isn't a big thing with Toby and me either, because of the randomness of the draw. But we played, and I played it once. Yeah.
I think some people, I've heard people, instead of having one tile in their hand, which is how the base game is structured, they'll say you can draw multiple tiles and then pick from them. So I wonder if in theory you played with a variant like that, if you guys would like it more, but there's still some randomness there, so.
Yeah, I'd probably like that better, but then there's so many other games, right? So
I know, right? Yeah, it's like, why spend time modifying this one when I've got all of these? But cool, so good choice, Cassadi, for your number 3, Carcassonne.
My number 2 is Space Alert, which is a real-time cooperative game. You've heard me say that a lot in this top 100. But
it's interesting how themes kind of cropped up without like me realizing it, and I think for you too, like throughout the list.
Well, I know I like real-time cooperative games, so
I guess I surprised myself then.
But yes, Space Alert is my favorite one of those. But basically, the theme is that you're in a spaceship going to like this area of the galaxy and trying to observe it and take pictures and survive for 10 minutes to take enough pictures and then go back. That's the theme. I've
literally never heard that like the taking pictures was the theme.
If you read the rule book, there's a lot of funny things in there because Vlaada Chvátil is he makes a lot of funny rule books. But yeah, so there's a real-time part for 10 minutes where you're planning your actions that you're going to do. So these threats come out, and there's a soundtrack that says, oh, threat detected in sector red or something at time 8. So then the way it works is you have programmable movement. So you have these cards that are like left, right, up and down, or pushing buttons, and you have to play it down to make your character move at that time, and you have to work with other people to try to destroy the threats that are coming. And then after all of that, the planning phase, which is 10 minutes, then you resolve everything. So then you flip over the cards that you played down and see if you actually did what you intended to do, which a lot of times is not what you did. So, and the threats can mess you up too, because if you don't kill the threats, then they'll do bad things to you, and they can damage the ship and make it harder to do things. So even if you calculated, oh, I have to shoot it this many times, if they damage you first, then your shots could do less damage. So then you don't end up killing it when you thought you did. Or you have to coordinate with someone else, and they didn't do their job, or they did it the turn after, like the time after that you thought they were going to do it. So it's very hectic trying to coordinate it, and it's really funny when something fails. But it's really awesome when you win too. So I like playing Space Alert a lot. We actually have an app that we downloaded that goes with it. Instead of doing the soundtrack, you can just do an app that randomizes the soundtrack. So you do like pick the difficulty and how many threats are appearing and stuff. So that's a lot of fun. Space Alert.
That's very cool. I've never played Space Alert. I feel like that's one that would be easier for us to fit in, maybe at our next convention.
Maybe. So the problem with Space Alert is it's very hard to learn for what it is.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Like it takes longer to learn than it does to play, right?
Yeah.
So maybe I could watch a couple rules videos and try and study up in advance, and then maybe we can play that the next time we're at a con together.
I actually have a how to play video on it.
Well, then, see, that's easy. I can just watch Ambie's how to play video, and then I can learn it and play it. And everybody else can do the same thing. Isn't that great? All right, so my number 2 will probably not come as a surprise to anyone that knows me or has listened to our podcast for any amount of time, and that is Battlestar Galactica, the board game. I'm not going to talk about the mechanics of the game too much. I really liked the Battlestar Galactica TV show, the rebooted version, not the old one, obviously. And it was funny because I actually purchased the board game before I had really started building up my board game collection and before I knew anything about the board game itself. So after I moved to Vegas, I want to say I was at Borders, back when Borders still existed, and they were having a sale on board games, and I saw that they had a Battlestar Galactica board game, and I loved the TV show, and I was just starting to build up my collection at that point, and so I was like, that looks awesome! I should just buy it! So I did, and it turns out to be the best game ever. Well, almost the best game ever. And it's really fun, and it's really hard. The Cylons, as Roy Cannaday says, are easy mode. If you're a Cylon, it's easy to win. So if you're human, it's really hard. But I have all of the expansions, and I like playing with pieces from all of them. And this game is great. It is a little hard to teach to new players at times, especially because some players don't like the idea of having to be a Cylon secretly. But we played this at Dice Tower Con in 2017, and Roy was sitting next to me, and he was a Cylon. I don't think he was a Cylon the whole time. I think he flipped in the middle of the game to a Cylon. But man, I believed he was human the whole time. So he kept doing things to mess stuff up. And everybody was like, who did that? Who could have done that? And no one's looking at Roy ever. And I don't... yeah, it was just ridiculous.
Sneaky.
Very sneaky. And it was funny because... Sam Healy was Apollo, or was he Starbuck? The two of us were Starbuck and Apollo. So since we in the show, they're obviously together, we were kind of trying to help each other out when we were flying around and doing space battles and stuff. It's a great game, and it creates a lot of great stories while you're playing it. But the mechanics are also sound. Mm-hmm. And as far as IP-based board games go, this is definitely one of the best.
Yeah.
And you and I have played this together as well.
Yeah. I really like Battlestar Galactica too. It made my list number 65, so you can look at that to see my thoughts on that and how I was a human recently for the first time.
Yay! But you didn't win.
No!
Yeah, because Cylons are easy mode, right, Roy? Yeah, I know.
But I died as a human.
That's awesome. So yeah, Battlestar Galactica, I've talked about it at length over and over and over again. I love it so much. If anybody wants to play it, I'm down. So that's why it's my number 2, Battlestar Galactica.
Cassidy's number 2 is Suburbia, which is a city building game. Tile-laying city building game. But you're building up a city of different types of tiles. So you have like parks and airports, I think, and other things, and you get different points depending on what type you have, but it's little hexes that you build up out of your board, so at the end you have like a whole city. But yeah, I've played it once. I think I enjoyed it, but I don't remember it as well as Cassidy would, obviously.
Yeah, I've never played Suburbia. I have played Ted Alspach's other similar game, Castles of Mad King Ludwig, and it was on my list at number, I think, 75, around there. It was in the 70s. So yeah, I like castles, and I would probably like Suburbia. I've just never played it before. So good choice, Cassidy, for your number 2, Suburbia.
Cassidy's number 1 is Legacy of Dragonholt. Which
we just talked about.
Yeah.
Just a little while ago. So you all have already heard my thoughts on it. Cassidy obviously loves it quite a bit. And I know that she was playing it in a similar way to me.
Also
in that she was playing it solo. So, yeah, obviously, good choice, Cassidy.
Yeah, obviously, I need to play this.
If you like story in games, this one, it's hard to top, honestly. So my number 1 game, probably also not a surprise, it is Star Trek Ascendancy. It is another IP-based game, which is crazy that my top 2 games are intellectual property-based games, but they're good ones. I am a Trekkie. Wait, what? No one's shocked? Okay, yeah, that's not surprising at all. And there are a lot of really, really bad Star Trek board games, for the record. In fact, most board games based on Star Trek are not good at all. This one, though, is one of the exceptions. It is awesome. So it's a 4X style game. The 4 X's, for those who aren't familiar, are explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. So you are exploring the galaxy, expanding your reach, exploiting the resources you find on planets and in phenomena and from your opponents, and then exterminating your opponents to gain galactic victory. What's really neat about this game, especially if you're a fan of Star Trek, is each of the races that are playable characters in this game have special abilities and hindrances that are thematically appropriate for what the race is. So, for instance, the Klingons, which are a warrior race, are never allowed to retreat from a combat, because in the Star Trek universe, that's something Klingons never do. So there's a lot of little thematic touches like that, and all of the planets and phenomena and things like that are things that exist within the Star Trek universe. So if you're like me and you know a lot about Star Trek, every time you discover a new planet or a new phenomena, you're like, oh yeah, like I know that planet, that's really cool, that's where so-and-so was from, or that's where those people are from. So it's got little thematic touches that make sense, but the mechanics are also really sound. And then what's neat is there was an expansion for it that added in the Borg that makes the game, you can play it kind of a little more semi-cooperatively or solo against the Borg, because the Borg are an AI, until they assimilate another race and then players take over for the Borg. There are a bunch of expansions that added new races to this, and there's new expansions coming later this year that I'm super excited about. The Vulcan High Council and Andorians are coming to join the Federation, Romulans, Ferengi, Klingons, and Cardassians. I almost forgot. So there's lots and lots of content for this one. If you like Star Trek and you like 4X games, this one is gonna knock it out of the park for you. It's so good. I love it to death, and that is why it is my number one, Star Trek Ascendancy.
Nice. Okay, my number one is Tragedy Looper, which is a time travel themed deduction game. And it's not like any other game I've played, I think. But in Tragedy Looper, there's one person who's playing as a mastermind and everyone else is playing against them. And it's like one of those logic puzzles that you do on paper with the grids. But the mastermind is trying to prevent the other people from solving the puzzle. So you can all play action cards on the characters on the board to make them move or move around to different locations or do other things, add tokens to them. And you know that on certain days, which is like each turn, bad things are going to happen, but you just don't know who the bad things are going to happen to and who causes the bad things to happen. And so you're trying to figure that out, but the mastermind knows everything that's going to happen and is trying to prevent you from figuring it out and make the bad things happen so that you lose. And then the time travel part happens. So once the other people lose, then it goes back in time, back to the reset, and everything goes again. But now you have some information. So then you can like move the people differently to see what happens then. Or if you figured out, oh, this person caused a bad thing to happen, so we need to stop them from doing that same thing. So you keep doing that. There's 10 different scenarios in the base game. And they each have a different number of loops that you can go through, and there's a set answer to it, so you can't really replay it unless you become the mastermind, because then you'll know like what the solution is. But I really enjoy it because I like those logic puzzles and deduction, and I think the time travel theme works really well with this because you're going back, repeating it, and trying to change it. So it's like one of those movies where you're trying to change the past to prevent the bad thing from happening, which is like what I think of when I think of time travel. And it's really fun playing as both the mastermind and as the other people, because as the other people you're trying to figure out the deduction part, but as the mastermind you're trying to think about what they're thinking about, and it's like a lot of mind games. So I really like Tragedy Looper, and that's why it's my number one.
That's awesome. I've still never played it. I know that you also have a how to play video for this one.
Yes, I guess I have a lot of those for my favorite games, huh?
I mean, that makes sense. You know, it's easier to teach the games that you love. I love time stories, but I've never played Tragedy Looper. How would you compare those two games?
Well, I like Tragedy Looper better.
What?
So they're very different. Like mechanically, they're very different games. Because Tragedy Looper is mainly the deduction part game, and then the time travel is in repeating the thing. Whereas Time Stories is more of a story game, I think. So, yeah, they're very different. They just share a similar theme.
Okay, yeah, Time Stories came in at number 25 on my list, so it's obviously one I like a lot. But I've definitely been interested in trying out Tragedy Looper at some point.
Time Stories was number 67 on my list.
Ah, okay. We don't really know all of the details of each other's lists because we've been making them independently. So I'll be curious to see if we synced up at any points. Although you and I, it's funny, there are certain games that we both love, but we tend to not gravitate toward the same groups of games for the most part. So I think it's really cool. Maybe that's why we're so interesting to listen to, or not. I don't know. But I guess that's it. So that's the end of our top 100 board game series. I hope everyone out there has enjoyed this. We kind of did it as a surprise. We've been working on it for quite some time. And I had to relearn how to do video editing, which was really fun for me. That's a lie. It was not fun, but I'm going to try and be doing more videos going forward. I'm going to start doing board game reviews, hopefully, soon. And I'm putting that in here because then that'll make me do it. So
yes.
I guess it's a real thing now. So thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.